Barashit bara Elohim et ha-shemayim et ha-aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This opening declaration in verse 1 stands alone. 7 Hebrew words say it all. And if you really understand this verse, you'll have no trouble with any other verse in the Bible. But once you understand the reason why there's something rather than nothing is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, then all the rest falls in place. Bereshith, the beginning. I quote Hebrew language scholar Dr. John Saulheimer from his book, Genesis Unbound. The Hebrew word Reshit, which Moses used, has a very specific sense in Scripture. In the Bible, the term always refers to an extended, indeterminate duration of time, never a specific moment. It is a block of time, which precedes an extended series of time periods. It is a time before a time. The term does not refer to a point in time, but to a period or duration of time which falls before a series of events. The book of Genesis only uses this Hebrew word one other time, and it is a period of time, not a point in time. In Genesis 10:10, the term Reshit is used to refer to the early part of Nimrod's kingdom. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. And when the Bible speaks of reigns of kings, the first period of a king's reign was usually not counted as part of the official length of his reign. An unspecified period was allowed in which the king actively reigned, but it was not officially counted. Now, after that period of unspecified duration, the years of the king's reign were added up. We are not told how long Nimrod took to establish his rule in the land of Shinar, only that it was the beginning of his reign. This is how the term is used elsewhere in Genesis and throughout the Pentateuch. Thus, proper hermeneutics demands that this is the way we should view it in Genesis verse 1. The beginning is an unspecified period of time. The second word, bara, to create out of nothing. Now this is in contrast to other words in Hebrew, to fashion or fabricate, to form or shape. The word bara is used only 3 times in the first chapter of Genesis because it only records 3 acts of creation. Number 1, the creation of something from nothing. In the beginning, God created the universe. Second instance is the creation of life. When it says, so God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves. Verse 21, that's animal life of all kinds. In the third instance, the creation of man. So God created man in his own image. Verse 27. Now the use of the verb bara for animal and human life precludes attempts to reconcile theistic evolution with the text. Yet, we must also conclude that God used this verb selectively to distinguish it from his other work, because the other events, like day 4 for instance, simply describe God arranging and fashioning what was already created in verse 1. Now the term Elohim, the name of God, appears to be a grammatical error because it's plural, not singular. Now this is recognized by many scholars as the first hint at the Trinity. Shemayim et ha-aretz. Now this is the term, the heavens and the earth. Now it's important to remember that the text of Genesis 1 was written to ancient Hebrews, not 21st century readers who have the benefit of having seen satellite photos of our planet. The Hebrew word, which is translated heavens, is probably more precisely translated as sky. And the Hebrew term, commonly rendered earth in English, try to put yourself in Moses' shoes. He had never seen a picture of the solar system or a globe. When an ancient Hebrew encountered this term, they would probably default something the equivalent of our word dirt or ground or land. However, in Genesis 1:1, what we see is a Hebrew figure of speech. The expression heavens and earth is a figure of speech called a merism, which means the entire universe. Here's the entry for the word merism from the online Dictionary of Language Terminology. Another example of a merism in the Bible is when Jesus said, "I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end." The phrase, the beginning and the end, includes all that God has done in the beginning and everything between until finally at the end. Now, to determine whether heavens and earth is being used as a merism, the context of the passage is king. For example, a very common misconception is to see Exodus 20, verse 11, as describing the same events as Genesis 1:1. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Now this is an example where the English heaven and earth is not being used as a merism. The universe includes the sea, so we must ask, to what does the pronoun them in the phrase all that is in them refer to? The plural sense is a dead giveaway that the verse does not use the Hebrew merism meaning universe. Thus, Exodus 20, verse 11 means that God made 3 distinct things in 6 days: the sky, the land, the seas, and that he filled them with all that is in them during the same period. In other words, it describes God's work between Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 and Genesis chapter 2, verse 4 in arranging the matter and the earth. Now, another widely held but easily dismissed misconception is that Genesis 1:1 is a summary statement or a title. The Hebrew language uses simple phrases as titles. For example, Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 is a title, and it reads, "This is the book of the generations of Adam." So if Genesis 1:1 were a title, we would expect to see something like, "This is the book of God's creation." Now, the view of Genesis 1:1 as a title or a summary also has a very serious logical problem. Because if it's true, then there's no mention of God ever creating earth or matter, as if it existed eternally. To illustrate how devastating viewing verse 1 as a title or a summary statement is, simply mark out verse 1 and then try to make sense of the Genesis account. You would have to start with, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." This would lead the reader to the idea that the earth had always existed. Even more destructive to the summary title idea is verse 2's use of a conjunction. Va in Hebrew, usually translated as and. Now, Hebrew grammar employs the use of conjunction very carefully. If verse 1 was a title, then verse 2 would not begin with a conjunction that means and or but. Thus, verse 1 is a factual statement of what God did in the beginning. Over an unspecified period of time, he created the entire universe consisting of stars, planets, and matter out of nothing.